Hello and welcome to the Drawk Show. I am very excited about this concept. I've been thinking about this for a while. Basically, I'm going to be going through with a few friends. We're going to come and go over the course of this stream some of the neat little seeds planted in the lore of Warhammer 40k. And we're going to be talking about all of the different, potential future factions. Because a lot of the factions in 40k are groups that kind of come out of bits of lore that were planted previously. Like the Custodians were talked about, the Gene Stealers were talked about, the Votan were the Squats, and then it gets expanded over time into an entire faction, something that you can play as in the tabletop. So right now I have Sean. Sean, do you want to reintroduce yourself to the audience?
Hello. Yeah, my name's Sean. I've been Lid's friend for a few years now. I,
A
I
few,
don't remember
couple,
when we
somewhere
met.
around there.
Yeah, a couple's vague enough. There we go. Yeah, we frequently play games together, tabletop games, like primarily.
Yeah,
And I,
I think I can credit you and the boys pretty much entirely for me giving a shit about Warhammer at all.
I was actually going to say that. I was trying to remember who actually introduced you. Did Tristan, who met you before I did,
Yeah.
introduce you, or was it more like once you started hanging out with the three of us more that you started getting more into it?
It was honestly, I didn't care about it at all until we played a bit of Warhammer Fantasy, the tabletop game, and then I watched enough lore videos trying to understand that for when I was going to run it, that I was getting suggested a bunch of content for Warhammer 40k, and I started to watch that and just realized, oh, this is way more interesting than I gave her credit for. So basically, we're going to be talking about different factions from throughout all the little lore tidbits, which I think is really cool if you don't know a lot about 40k, because what got me into it are all these little snippet videos that talk about a little piece of Warhammer lore, like one little element. That's the stuff that really got me engaged in Warhammer 40k, these little tidbits, and that's exactly what we're talking about. So I'm going to jump right into mine. The Men of Iron. A long time ago, humanity's technology was fucking rad. They had automated 3D printers of tech that went around the galaxy. They had crazy cool spaceships with cannons that fired black holes, all sorts of awesome shit. And most
Weapons that
powerful
eat concepts.
weapons that eat concepts. And the most powerful thing they had was AI, the Men of Iron. At some point, the Men of Iron revolted. Some of them didn't, some of them did. Some of them defended humanity. Most of them tried to kill him. We don't know the details because it's 40k, and we don't know the details about pretty well anything.
Well, this is the deep backstory of
Yeah,
the deep backstory.
yeah.
Like the Horus Heresy for a long time was the deep backstory of the setting. This is
This is
5,000 years
the
before that.
before that.
Yeah.
So, throughout this video, what's going to be a little different is I'm going to be trying to go real fast because I'm just doing very quick, silly doodles of each of the things we talk about. And I'm going to be trying to adapt on the fly best I can. But there's a moment in the lore that I think is so interesting where one of the sentient ships of the Men at Iron comes to the 40th millennia. They see everything happening. They see how fucked up everything is in the Imperium of Man. And the people on board are like, clearly we should help them. Now, they're from way in the past. The way space travel works is you go through hell and a dimension of concepts. So sometimes you accidentally jump forward in time. It happens. So they come forward in time. They don't know how long it's been, but they see that everything's kind of messed up and bad. They go to help, and people are like, hey, our sentient spaceship captain, who is a spaceship and a captain, sent us down to help you guys. And because AI is completely outlawed because of what happened with the Men of Iron, all of them get slaughtered. The details here, I'm being very non-specific and kind of inaccurate to get to the gist of it. But basically, this battleship, a sentient battleship, had its crew be slaughtered and was like, oh, it turns out things are bad now. The Imperium tried to stop it. It no-diffed all of the battleships that were sent to kill it and left the galaxy. What I think could be done with this is if the ship went off, used its insanely advanced 3D printers, and started building up an army of Men at Iron to come back and get revenge for its dead crew. Because we know that a lot of these old AI were highly empathetic and cared a lot about humanity, which is why it was originally trying to help. Sean, what problems do you see with this as someone who knows the lore a bit better?
Well, it depends on if they actually have a full STC, including the STC, the actual constructor, not simply the patterns. The patterns.
They have to have the constructor for this concept to work, so
Yeah.
I'm going to say they have a constructor.
Okay. the only thing I can see then is that you are essentially unleashing into the galaxy a bunch of incredibly powerful machines that aren't necessarily going to agree with you unless the AI ship started uploading its mind, like copies of its mind into each as a baseline,
And I think
and
it would
essentially creating a new species that way.
no faction ever really works the way it wants to. That's a thing in
Yeah,
40k is everything is wrong. So I think the STC has to be partially corrupted by its time in the warp so that there's all these factions that are coming and the one ship, while it's like largely in control of shit, isn't fully in control of what's happening
yeah.
anymore.
The exact degree to which an AI can be corrupted through contact to the warp is not really specific. Like the first Titan, that whole story
Yeah.
has an AI Titan, so massive, stupidly large walker, and it is again it's corrupted. And then you also have the story during the Horus Heresy of the Kaban machine, I think it's called, which
Okay.
was very quickly corrupted by chaos as soon as it sort of realizes its life is in danger. Because okay, so the interaction between inanimate matter and the warp is kind of weird because
Well, I mean,
either it has no signal in the warp or it has no resistance to the warp. It's
yeah,
kind of
something that I've seen is it's kind of a little bit of both, but like because the warp involves technology, especially with something that we might talk about in a future video like this, uh, demonic code exists canonically, or at least is theory to exist by some
no, that's
inquisitors.
scrap code.
Oh,
Scrap code
that's
is
scrap
just a
code.
thing.
Oh,
Scrap code is
it is
just a
confirmed.
thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
but like demonic code existing tells you it's very possible, and I think you could keep it very vague with the Men of Iron faction, where like you don't really know if all of these individual personalities that are coming out are because of glitches and errors, or if it's just sort of because of that's how it's built. And this machine, the Men at Iron ship, because it cares about humanity, cares about free will. Like, is it uploading consciousness records of its crew? Is it uploading its own consciousness? I think you could keep that really kind of vague with what's happening, but still have all of these splinter factions. And like, I could even see some splinter factions that are like, no, I'm not here for revenge. I like mankind. I'm here to protect them still, despite what you tell me. And you could have like weird things where some of these Men at Iron fleets, knowing the Imperium hates them, still shows up to help because they care that much about humanity.
Yeah. And there is that example of a Man of Iron who, the one who went to, oh God, Blackstone Fortress. There we go. The one that's
Mm.
in the far periphery. And he's kind of helping to explore it. And he does seemingly care about humanity, at least in this sort of, they might be bastards, but they're my bastards kind of thing. Like,
Oh,
they're
I
my
love it.
asshole family. That sort of attitude.
Yeah,
Um,
I could absolutely see that being played with some of the factions that you'd see, or sub factions you'd see within this group.
yeah. I guess one issue is that they would have to rely on calculated warp jumps as opposed to true navigators.
Yeah, because their
Um,
navigator is dead.
yeah. So
They got lost in the warp. They don't have a navigator, so I think they would have like no faster than light communication and very unreliable faster than light travel, which would be their biggest like lore weaknesses, because every faction has
mhm.
different gameplay weaknesses and lore weaknesses. And honestly, one of my biggest gripes with 40k's design is as much as the strengths between the lore and the tabletop match up really well, the weaknesses don't always feel like they do.
Yeah.
But I think this could be really fucking cool. So I want to quickly, with all of these, talk about like what I see the aesthetics and what I see the lore, how they fit into the lore and how they fit into gameplay. For aesthetics, a lot of the Men at Iron stuff we see is this weird mix of smooth and blocky, where everything's a little bit bulkier and more bulbous than it needs to be, but very like smooth and Star Trekky. And I think that like the battle droids, the ones without the neck from Star Wars, you know the ones I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that's a very common type of aesthetic I see. So I'm kind of imagining these like the Men at Iron faction that we'd see being like kind of a mix of big, blocky, brutalist shapes and smooth, seamless design.
Okay. Wait. I actually did find an example of Men of Iron being described in lore, at least by Dan Abnett in Tanith First and Only.
Okay, hit me
Here
up.
we go. Here we go. These are the ones that are not structurally corrupted, apparently. Each
Okay,
stood far taller than a man, with faces like sightless skulls of burnished steel. The sinews and arteries of their bodies formed from cable and wire encased in anatomical plate sections of lusterless alloy. Behind the dark grills in the alcoves, metal limbs were beginning to flex and uncurl, As he watched, eyes lit up in dead sockets, blue. Men of iron stumbled forward out of their alcove, their metal feet crunching over the fallen grill sheet. All around, their companions rattled and shook at their pens, eyes burning with blue-hot backwash of missile tubes. Murmuring their sonorous hum, the metal skeleton spilling out of the cage began to advance across the chamber.
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay. So that does conflict with some of the art I've seen that's more blocky and robust, so I'm not going to change this design entirely, but
that's just
I
it.
love that vibe. It's also a little too Necron.
Yeah, it is. But again, Man of Iron is such a vague term.
Yeah. Like,
All
I
it
feel
means is a completely artificial life form that isn't in any way biological. Like, because there
yes.
are, like, artificial biological life is also iffy, but that's its own separate thing.
But so I like this idea of like a more pragmatic and less decorative looking Necron design, though, like something that's still humanoid, but like not meant to reflect the values of a human, more printed, made for print and function based.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like
that's
it
kind of
should
how.
be.
Sorry, you go.
The baseline sort of 40k aesthetic is very impractical. Like pretty much
Yeah,
every faction is designed as much around, the ritual of the act as the act itself.
true. So I think we don't want to abandon that entirely. So how do we see like a machine adding in kind of ritual to it? Because I don't
mean, the
want it to
question
be an
is,
entire clash.
no, that's fair because like the example that's coming to mind is like the Votan.
Yeah, the vote. Yeah,
They're sort of
Votan,
mixing
Votan.
of Votan. Yeah, yeah. They're sort of mixing of the incredibly practical with the somewhat ritualistic that almost seems to have creeped in.
Oh, you know what I could see? Something very specifically anti-Imperium because these were built as vengeance for crewmates killed by the savage Imperium. So I could see something trying to harken back to the Dark Age of Humanity or be like against the Imperium, like an emblazoning specifically designed to look antithetical to the Imperium's designs. Like, let me just play with that.
Okay, hear me out. Hear me out. A
Uh-huh.
robotic fist crushing the laurel that is often used as a symbol of the imperial sort of governments.
Oh, that's kind of sick. Okay.
So,
So
like a
let's see.
ragged laurel being held up and crushed in a
I'm
robotic fist.
imagining like
That's kind of
this
my
just
idea.
two fingers and a grip claw for making
Oh
it
yeah.
more mechanical.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. I like that idea of a way of because that's a way to bring in a little bit of like unnecessary design that makes them feel like they're on this quest of vengeance from the crew being killed by the savage Imperium. So, for how they fit into the lore, I imagine them being like this sudden and aggressive force that is immediately hated by everyone because as much as they don't give a shit about people other than the Imperium, like for killing their crew, like that was the foundation. I think the rest of the galaxy would be like, oh, robots are scary, robot army scary, and just be blowing these fuckers up at every opportunity.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give my quick thoughts on that. So
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing. Sometimes in the lore, it is implied that other factions joined with the Golden Age of humanity to fight the Men of Iron.
That makes sense. Like they were a threat
Um,
to the entire galaxy.
yeah. Additionally, I would say that like the way that I would sort of introduce them would be almost like really back in the day Tyranids were introduced with just worlds going dark.
Yes,
Because
I
if they're
like that.
smart, they would hit hard, knock out communications, and not let even the rumors of their existence spread. Because if the
Yeah.
Imperium knew about this, it would be maybe not the top priority, but pretty goddamn close.
Yeah, like it's not like discovering the Tau where it's like, okay, they're bad but not that bad and they're not building fast enough to like we don't need to snuff these guys out and it would cost so much to destroy them that we really can't afford resources. It would be like, oh, if this gets out of control, it will wipe us out. Holy shit.
Hmm.
They are printing new people. I don't like that version of the claw. We're going to get back to that once I get some more shape shadows. Yeah, so I think they'd be like a very high priority. I think the other thing is, as much as they could show up suddenly with a lot of power because of the need of getting resources, I don't think they would be showing up at the point the ship wanted to. Like, I think it is going to realize that it needs to start taking worlds because the Imperium is mining non-habitable planets just by using like different technologies to do so. So I don't think it'd be that easy for it to just like get enough resources to build up an army without coming in contact with the Imperium before it's ready. I think also it's just not interesting if it can get all the way ready, you know?
Yeah, I would also make the argument that the sheer quantity of space that is not occupied, like the Imperium is thin on the galaxy when you actually consider how many stars there are
True.
and how many are off major warplanes. Yeah,
What?
it's one of those. Sorry.
I was just thinking, what faction then do you think runs into them first if they're staying away from the Imperium and trying to go to these non-habitable worlds, traditionally non-habitable?
Hmm. Like, it could be interesting to have the first contact with them be the Eldari, like the craft world Eldari.
That would be a good way of solidifying that lore that they did help humanity, of them just being like, oh fuck, they're back? No.
Yeah. Like, it could actually be that they stumble across a world that is rich in raw resources, but it also has this weirdly vibrant ecosphere, and they start destroying because they don't care about it, only to realize that it's a maiden world. And the craft
Okay.
world Eldar basically come out pissed beyond all belief,
Yeah.
and the Men of Iron having no idea that this was
Because
that this was the bear they were poking.
maiden worlds are, for people who don't know, worlds that the Eldari preserve and enhance to be like bastions of beauty in an otherwise dark galaxy that are treated as like the most important things within their culture.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's almost their promised homeland. It's like when we deserve it, we will live there. It's kind of
yeah.
that idea. Some
Right now,
Exodites
we
already
need
live
to.
on where yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, you go.
Some Exodites, so they're Amish, already live on Maiden Worlds and just do everything they can to not really damage it. They're kind of the equivalent of Wood Elves in that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Maiden Worlds are seen as kind of the future promised land that we must preserve at all costs.
So I think that would be a great way of introducing these guys. And I think it would be cool if they were trying to not be touched by anyone. They go to this world they think is uninhabited, turns out to be a maiden world. The Eldari find out, and like the way the Imperium learns is by rumors of them coming from the Eldar to Gilliman, who kind of has an in with them, where he's being told, hey, the Men of Iron are back, and he's like, that's not possible. And they're like, no, 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 no. They were super duper are. We don't like talking to you. We wouldn't if this wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. No, I could see that. Yeah, totally.
And that's a way of having it be just a rumor at first.
Hmm.
You know what faction I could see them surprisingly getting along well with? Not surprisingly, even Votan.
Maybe. Yeah, it could go either way.
I think you would have exchanges where the Votan are like, "Hey, you're robots. We like robots. You like old humanity better than new humanity. We like old humanity better." And I think there's other places where they'd be like, "Well, this is dangerous and bad, so no."
Yeah, fair enough. By the way, how did you really want to structure this? Are you just going to keep talking about this topic until you're done the drawing, or?
I think so.
All right, sounds good.
I think
I'm just
like
wondering if you're expecting me to chime in and start talking about one of my three.
no, I'll let you know.
Sweet.
But I'm thinking we'd go through these, and once the drawing is kind of done and the conversation is petered out, which I think should be hitting about the same time, we kind of move on to the next concept. And we're not going to get to all the ideas we have. This is something I want to do again with all the lads. Tristan is probably showing up a bit late. Travis is probably showing up to be sort of an audience standpoint to point out any time we mention something that the average person wouldn't know about, and we need a bit of explanation.
Yeah, the average like casual fan who's sort of heard of Warhammer, but like
Exactly.
yeah,
Just to make sure we're giving the right info.
fair.
But I think I'd love to do this again because just go through all of the ideas we have because Warhammer is just full of these little nuggets where you're like, oh, this could be expanded on. This could be expanded on. And this is the one that got me thinking about it was how cool it would be to see these beings that showed up wanting to help the Imperium. So it ends up being a hoisted by your own petard sort of thing where like these things would have been willing to die for the Imperium, and instead it is creating an army to destroy it. I also think the ship shouldn't be able to necessarily create. It can't create new STCs, the production centers of the Dark Age. So like it's having this production slowdown outside of the hub world is going to take a lot longer. Ire is pointing out this looks a bit like the Iron Man Mark One. Absolutely, and that is an aesthetic I love. That's definitely part of why I'm doing it. I think the Mark One looks rad as hell.
Well, it's a sort of mix of like high technology, but still a little gritty. Because
Yeah.
even at its, I don't know, even at its most fantastical, even at its most optimistic, 40k is still pretty gritty in terms
Mm-hmm.
of aesthetic.
Absolutely. Like even when things are it's a mix of impractical and functional. Like it's not pushed so far into impractical that it can't do what it's supposed to. But
Except
you
the
look
Harlequins.
except the Harlequins. Look, the Harlequins don't need to make sense. They're
Clown
space
goblins.
clowns. They're clown
Clown
elf
goblins.
goblins.
Clown elf goblins.
Here to save the world, maybe.
I
I love
mean,
the idea of the laurel being grabbed. That's so much better than what I had, which was just the Aquila upside down. Just upside down eagles, like, take that, Imperium.
okay, look, personal pet peeve. I am against X, therefore I just turn upside down like X. I hate that
No,
aesthetic.
it's bad design. It's not fun. It's not
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you. Okay.
So we're just gonna you know when you just do this? There we go. Oop, that's the front guy. He's not supposed to be the small one. Yeah, the just turning it upside down is just boring design. I didn't want to do that, but it was all I had. So the gripping the laurels I like much, much better. So now I'm just gonna do some hue shifting, as we love to do. Oh, there we go. Just this is just some Photoshop shenanigans to do the quickest, cheapest, dirtiest fake sense of depth you can accomplish. Fuck yeah, legions, instant legions. One guy turned into a legion that easy. Can you believe it? But I also, there's something I find so fun about the boss of this faction being a battleship. I think that's very funny to me for some reason.
Fair enough.
Especially because, like, I guess the Tyranids also are in that state. We just don't really know what the hive mind's main brain is.
I mean, does it have a main brain or is it just alt?
We don't know. It's just a consciousness that exists within the Nids, which I think is cool. So how I see this faction playing on tabletop is, I think they'd be very Custodes-like in that they're high-value units. You can't have that many of them on the battlefield easily. They don't have that much unit variety similar to the Custodes, where it's a lot of like everything they have is very specialized for doing what it does. Or not specialized, sorry. They are generally built to do a few things, and because of that, they fill enough roles that the roster is like both diverse and non-diverse. Like individual units are diverse like Custodes, but just like them, there's not that many specialized units. And you would be playing them in tabletop kind of going for objectives more than eliminating the opponent, because that's what I think they'd be good at. I also think they would have a bit of the like Necron coming back when they're knocked down element, like the living metal effect, basically, which, you know, feels like an obvious thing to give them, but hey, I think that it's obvious for a reason.
Yeah.
Can you think of any like cool tabletop features you'd give this sort of faction?
Oh geez, I'm trying to like thing is okay. So here's the thing. I haven't played much at all since like 6th edition.
Fair enough.
But just the idea of them being able to mess with enemy technology.
Oh god, yeah, I could see them giving shooting debuffs based off of like hacking or EMPs or something.
Yeah. Additionally, I could see like if you wanted to put them in a more brutal direction, them having a lot of weapons that specifically target, biological things, so gas weapons, stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, so they
would be
don't play
immune
as
to.
well against Necrons and Tau and the like, but against like Imperium or Nids, they'd be devastating.
But the big thing is that they don't have to worry about friendly fire because of that, because like they can essentially use a lot of AoE weapons that just don't bother them. That's kind
Oh,
of how
I
I'd go with it.
love that. I think that's great. I think, hear me out. I think the Tau, because the Tau use AI to an extent, would really be off-put by the arrival of these guys because it basically talks about the future potential of their technology.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the Tau at this point have a decent understanding of Imperial history. Like surprisingly, like I guess because a couple apparently an Inquisitors changed sides, or like a couple.
I mean, makes
which
sense.
still wild to me, but
Yeah,
I guess it makes some sense. Like they're already more open-minded than the vast majority of
well, yeah,
anyone in the
their
Imperium.
job is basically to be more open-minded, so it makes sense that they'd be able to like actually hear out the argument for the greater good. Not all of them are going to take it, but they're all going to, at the very least, philosophically ask it because their whole point of existing is being able to be more inquisitive.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm almost done here. I don't like the look of this ship, but also it's in the distance, so I don't know how to. Well, let's just add some greebles. That's how you make a ship cool, is greebling. Uh, oh, yeah. I just love the idea of the Men in Iron coming back in this way where they really aren't their true full power selves, but like you still feel a bit about that power. I think because of the era they're built in, they're also like built not especially melee focused, like tough enough that you can't just rip them apart in melee, but their weapon skill's not very good.
Yeah, no, I could see that.
Like we have advanced targeting systems. We have imperfect aim. We can fire on the move really easily. How are you at punching stuff? You know, my arm's a gun.
I mean,
I can club
yeah.
you with it.
Yeah, it was actually it just reminds me of like when the Tau first encountered the orcs, like things that they couldn't just outrun and outshoot. Things that just like the sheer mass of them made a proper war of maneuver impossible. Because the enemy will just fill the plane with, well, either vehicles or bodies. It was very interesting, and that kind of makes you think of I find myself questioning like what sort of wars was the Federation fighting, the Human Federation, way back in the day?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what did the galaxy look like? And obviously, that's not something we're ever going to get a hard answer to.
No,
Um,
I think it's kind of impossible for us to ever really know fully, but I think this faction could give us just that small hint at that of what the past of the Imperium of Man was like.
yeah, no, because the thing is, in terms of like old timeline, one of the big questions is how did the Eldar Empire waning fit into the timeline of, well, human civilization? Were the Eldar in the process of waning while humanity had its galactic like society? Where the Eldar already basically like corrupted and it just took like the entire lifespan of the Human Federation for it to finally truly collapse into just decadence? Yeah, I don't know. It's one thing that I find myself thinking about a decent amount in terms of like backstory. It's one of the, at least to me, one of the more interesting bits of the backstory.
I agree. I've actually thought about that a lot myself, and I think anything that could give a tidbit of that without anything definite, I like, which is another thing I think is cool about this as a faction idea. I think I'm done.
All right.
I think we've talked enough about robots coming back to 40k, how they'd be kind of flawed, how they'd fit in, how they'd play. I think the type of player that this would appeal to is the same type of player who likes things like Voton or Tau, where they just like advanced technology and shooty armies.
Yeah.
All right.
And just elite armies are fun.
Yeah, things with high value units where like
Yeah.
3 of your guys can blow up 30 of the enemy before they go down.
You know, the guy who brings a knight army to a 2,000-point game, puts down his one model.
Puts down the one model.
Yeah.
It points out there's a little bit of Samus thrown in. To be fair, Samus has like the coolest power armor design ever. So anything ending up looking like Samus is, I think, just a result of all of us looking at Samus and going, "Yeah, if power armor should look like that, probably." I love Samus's design. All right, the Men of Iron. Let's title the file. Sean,
Yes.
what's your idea? What's your pitch?
Okay. Well, the thing is, I've got 3 that I sort of came in with. Do you want weird Xenos, weird Xenos, or do you want non-imperial human?
I
So I
think we
can make
got
a pitch.
Ooh, I like weird non-imperial human, but I think I want weird Xenos first. I think in the order
Okay.
you said them is how we should get through them.
All right, then I'm going to start out with the coral.
Xenos, by the way, means alien in Warhammer 40k talk. It's just what they call all non-humans. All right, how do you spell that so I can get a reference up?
That is a Q, a apostrophe, I think.
Apostrophe?
Blanking on it. ORL.
Coral. That's a bug, my man.
That is indeed a bug.
All right. We
So,
got big bug.
part of the issue is that there isn't really that much written about them at all. Like, they are just one of those bits of, I think they come up with in some things with Dark Heresy, like first edition, and they came up in Xenobiologus, which is old lore book that still gets referenced occasionally, but not that often. Just it's one of those things of like you hear something weird and wacky from old 40k, and you're like, ah, that's gonna be one of those books. It's like the Liber Chaotica for Warhammer Fantasy, where it's like, oh yeah, that weird old book.
Yeah, the weird old book with the weird old shit.
Yeah. Still has some of my favorite ideas, and I know Tristan's Blondie's going to talk about at least one of them and gush about it because it's fantastic as an idea. But so, anyways, moving on to my sort of thing I want to talk about.
Yeah. Coral.
So
this fun bug.
They are capable of hyper specialization of individual organisms by essentially hormone treatment of their young.
Oh, okay. So similar to real life eukaryotic or eusocial animals, right?
They still have a sense of individuality. They are not tyranids.
So they're not eusocial, but they still have the okay.
They're eusocial in the way that humans are eusocial.
Yeah,
basically.
eusocial.
They have a totalitarian and absolute xenophobic ideology.
Okay.
And they absolutely worship their god queen. They are essentially I think they were a writer's way of poking fun at the Imperium.
Gotcha.
Because in a lot of ways, they're weirdly similar to the Imperium.
So these weird big bugs with a little oil spigot for a stinger are similar to the Imperium of mankind.
Yeah, in terms of their ideology, their worldview, in terms of how they actually behave. Because, I mean, that's just it. Most humans live in hive cities, and they're called that for a reason. Most, like, you look at how humans are treated, like, individual humans are treated by the Imperium as a whole, and it's not that different from how a hive of insects will expend its individual members without really much thought. You look at sort of the way that the Imperium worships its founding member, or sorry, founding the idea of its founder. It's sort of paternal father figure in the God Emperor. They are the same for their maternal figure in their queen.
So this would almost act as a foil for the Imperium by being cartoonishly inhuman, yet very similar to 40k's humanity.
Yes. Also, the Imperium puts skulls everywhere, and the Coral, one thing that they're known for, is building things out of their own dead. They really like incorporating their own dead bodies into various bits of architecture. They have this sort of culture of extreme ancestor worship due to the fact that they have very short lives, but are also very, like, they have this strong sense of tradition and the strong sense of being connected to the past. Again, a lot weirdly like the Imperium. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's kind of how I could see them being brought in. The one thing that has really slowed them... Oh, right. One other thing I was going to bring up about them as a sort of a big advantage, and this is going to sound weird as an advantage.
Okay.
They have been expanding for a very extended period without warp travel. And the way I see that as an advantage... the way that I see that as an advantage is they exist primarily outside of the major warp lanes of the galaxy.
So they could be introduced as filling in all these little pockets and gaps.
Yes.
Oh my god, I love that so much. Because, so for everybody who doesn't know, the warp, because it's this plane of thought that's used for fast travel, you can really only access places that there's a lot of concept of, that people are, like, connected to mentally. Easily, at least.
Also just somewhat randomly. There is just a lot of random in terms of where it's stable. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could have all these areas that are warp unstable, where there hasn't been enough humanity for there to be easy concept of, or other warp active species, that these guys have just been filling in. And that would also let you introduce them as being incredibly populous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they are at least 5,000 years of, like, organized travel. Organized high-tech society. Yeah, and they are relatively close to Terra, if I remember correctly. Yeah, the Coral homeworld is, by galactic standards, pretty close to Terra.
Yeah. How is their physiology? Like, how adaptable are they to, like, harsh climates?
Now we're starting to get to the absolute edge of the lore that there
Fair enough. So we
is.
could just say that they're very adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, we know that they can alter their physiology to an insane degree using
Oh my
hormone
god,
treatments.
yeah.
So adapting to different, like what we would consider to be utterly inhospitable terrain or utterly inhospitable climates, probably wouldn't be that bad. So they could be this weird new faction that's gobbling up all the in-between bits of territory that no one really saw the value in or couldn't get access to because they were reliant on warp travel.
Yeah.
Additionally, the sort of last little bits of lore, like most up-to-date bits of lore, has them developing a version of themselves that can burrow into people's brains and control them. And they're using that to get navigators.
And so there is a built-in reason that they're suddenly coming into contact with people and able to access warp planes, and they would have this flood of technology coming in. So navigators being the psychics who can navigate the warp for the Imperium. It's how they do their faster than light travel. So if these guys are mind controlling them, they are basically stealing pilots to be able to make it. Oh my god, these would fit so well.
Yep.
All
And
right.
they could be this absolutely terrifying, completely off guard. So, like, because again, they're close to Terra. They are in what is usually considered to be the Imperium's own backyard.
What I was going to say and why I asked about their adaptability is imagine if, like, suddenly it's discovered, and these would be snuffed out quickly, but suddenly it's discovered without anyone having known because you warp out of the galaxy or solar system and never paid attention that there were millions of these living in the Oort cloud.
Yeah. I mean, oh, shoot, what is that actually? As in our cloud, isn't it within our own solar system?
Yeah, the cloud of debris outside of the clear
Yeah.
solar system.
I think being that close would be a bit of. I couldn't see that. Sorry.
You don't
Like,
think so? But
yeah.
but the
No. Like,
Imperium doesn't really send anything out into the Oort cloud because they can warp out of the galaxy.
no, they still do.
Oh, they
Mostly
do? Okay, I
because
thought they
they're.
didn't.
Yeah. No, they
Fair
still
enough.
like. Okay. The system of Sol is so heavily patrolled, like
Fair
even the
enough.
absolute outskirts of it, because they got caught off guard by an
Oh,
attack on
right.
Pluto way back during the Horus Heresy, and then just never forgot it and never stopped being absolutely scared shitless of
But
it.
that one time that a planet of orcs showed up.
Well, more like that one time most of the Alpha Legion showed up.
Yeah. They've been surprised since, but they've tried harder not to
Yeah.
be.
Oh, you mean like okay? To be fair, no one knew you could teleport a planet.
No one knew you could teleport a planet. 40k lore for newcomers to the franchise. Orcs can teleport planets if they get smart enough.
Look, it was one book series, and it made some choices.
Hey, this video exists specifically to talk about weird niche lore in the 40k
So
universe
true.
and its repercussions.
Fair.
It happened. They did it.
Mm-hmm.
Orcs teleported a planet.
Prime orcs.
Prime orcs. I know you hate it. I think that's the best name. It's so good. It's mighty orky.
No, I'll never forgive him for it.
It's
I'll
so
never
good.
forgive you for liking it.
So, where do we see these fitting into the lore, in your opinion? Like, do they have any alliances? How do people react? How do the non-humans react?
Okay. I think so. The thing is, they are actually intelligent.
Yeah.
They have made an alliance with the Eldar in the past, at least temporarily.
Okay.
Though the Eldar arguably betrayed them, though it's kind of who betrayed who. Yeah.
Always the elves. Elves always betray people. Look, guys,
Yeah.
it was one time. Orug was very, very drunk at the time. Great. True.
Look, there's a reason why Eldar diplomacy is a meme in the community. Because it's yeah.
So
Anyways,
these bugs.
yes, these bugs. I could see them trying, actually, maybe reestablishing some sort of contact with the Eldar. But I was going to say the Tau, but the problem is they're literally the opposite side of the galaxy from the Tau.
Oh, okay, so that couldn't line up because I think those philosophies interacting would be very interesting. But part of the concept of the Tau is how they are limited to their region of space.
Yeah.
It's a big part of what makes the Tau the Tau.
Yeah, I could see them in the current timeline being the new scary thing that is attacking close to Gilliman's sort of like the area he tightly holds. The
I can see
thing that
that.
makes like the sort of main Imperium Sanctus, that was it, actually still have to like really worry as in terms of its own survival.
I would say I'm loving how this fucking bug is looking. Love this shit. What a good bug.
Spooky.
Spooky bug. So they could be. I think these make sense to me to introduce through the Imperium, like them discovering them somewhere close-ish to the Sol.
Yeah, I could even see them. Okay, so the fact that they have brain bugs that they can use to infest humans and like basically puppet them.
We are in the bug zone.
The fact that exists means that they could. We're in the bug zone.
We're in the bug zone.
There's no escape in the bug zone.
So their mind control would let them just kind of.
They could actually catch the Imperium like off guard. They could be sending back false reports.
Oh my god, you're right.
Like, because again, the thing is, they're not like the Tyranids. They're in a way a lot smarter than them. They are, and also they are individuals. Are capable of more clever tactics. They're capable of understanding what they're fighting in a different way. If
I think there's very little smarter than the Tyranids in general. But as far as but the Tyranids, it's all math. It's all what is the biomass cost versus the biomass reward. Whereas these, because there's a level of individuality, they're not playing the long game, which makes them very scary in the moment.
The way that I almost want to make an argument that they're capable of genuine empathy. They're capable of looking at the Imperium and seeing another player as opposed to just food.
I think that makes sense for how you've described them, especially if they start mind controlling them and finding out like the internals of the Imperium. And so when you were talking about false messages, so we said earlier that the Imperium uses psychics to guide people through the warp. It also uses psychics to send messages. It's how they do faster than light communication. They could absolutely take over an astropath.
Oh, totally.
And just use its psychic powers to send a report like, all good here, Chief. Don't worry about this system. Everything's Gucci.
Yeah, I mean, they could even go so far as to basically say, like, oh yeah, you can totally strip this entire region of, defenses because there's absolutely nothing going on here.
Oh my god.
I am a totally loyal servant of the Administratum sending this message. Definitely. Mm-hmm.
And if they mind controlled an Inquisitor, they could get so much information on, like, ambush. I could see their ships just, like, waiting and ambushing a battleship that wasn't prepared for combat or was coming for repairs or something. Like, you suddenly have attacks on damaged ships by a faction refusing to engage with anyone who is at full capacity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, okay, so what little we know about their space-based tactics is they have what are called chain ships, which are ships that are like literally linked together like chains. And one of their primary tactics, and each of these ships is capable of independent flight. They, when confronted with like an actual major opposition, they will just split up their ships into individual subvessels, and a few of them will get caught and annihilated, but most of them will escape. They have no problem with the idea of fleeing from battle.
Yeah, and, which would fit so fucking well with intercepting messages, because like, look, pull a George Washington. If I'm not going to win in a huge victory, I'm not going to fight.
Yeah.
Like, pick their battles, just no shame about fleeing because it's not in their culture, unlike the Imperium. And I think that would make them, like, that would be the big thing that makes them stand apart from the Imperium, when so much as they have in common is just this, like, the practicality.
I think the thing that makes them stand apart from the Imperium is their giant scary bug monsters.
That too. That does help them stand out. I meant more on a philosophical level.
Yeah.
So what do you see for how they would play in the tabletop? And, like, aesthetic, I don't think we need to go much into. They're big bug monsters. They'd be a little bit more, I think, real bug-looking than Tyranids would be the main difference.
Mm-hmm. But I could see them as maybe fast and hard-hitting, overly specialized in terms of their units.
Yeah,
like,
the opposite of the Men of Iron. Very specialized units.
Hyper-specialized and maybe a little bit hoardy.
I could see that. I think like having the option to crap stack or to play diverse both feel.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely don't you don't make an elite army with the bugs.
What I'm saying is, when it comes to specialization, it's not specialization as in they're each like specialists and very good. It's more like each of them is very cost effective when it's fighting what it's supposed to fight.
I love that as an idea because it would be a faction that really rewards positioning and maneuvering, which would
Totally.
actually play into what we've talked about with the lore, where it seems like their biggest weakness in lore would be that if they are caught off guard, like their main advantage is putting things in their benefit. So when things aren't in their benefit, they get fucked over.
Mm-hmm. As far as I'm aware, they don't have any psychic powers. That's kind of out.
I mean, not at all, because they mind control bugs. They could have mind controlled psychers that you from other factions you buy at a higher cost.
Yeah, I guess I could kind of see that. They could be sort of a weird Xeno soup if they actually wanted to go that route with it.
Yeah, I think I don't know, or at the very least have like a psychic Xenos that they're breeding for psychers.
I mean, I don't want to get too much into that idea, mostly because that's my other Xenos pick is pretty big on that. Which look, I'm getting excited about all of the things I came in here to talk about. Like,
Look, they're all good. I'm excited for all of them. Yeah, I think we've talked about aesthetics are bug. The weaknesses are that they need things in their territory. I think, is there anything else we want to add on for the bug guys?
they like cybernetics, and that's neat.
Oh, right. So that's why it had the weird oil spigot tail, was because they do biomechanical enhancements.
Biomechanical bug man.
Biomechanical bugs. I like that idea. It would also make them stand out more from the. I'm going to change the color a bit to reflect that in a sec. It'd make them stand out a bit more from the NIDS too if they had like a lot of machinery and you'd have basically like cyborg bugs as part of the army.
Yeah, like
Oh,
the only thing I can think of that's kind of similar to them is the. Do you know the lair?
I don't know the lair.
Okay, so they're the Xenos race that was hyper advanced, hyper devoted to Slanesh, and were just really scary during the Horus Heresy period.
Okay.
Because the corruption of the Emperor's children really started with the lair.
Interesting.
Because they had a sword that had a greater demon in it that was kind of running their society. And they were all about individual perfection through extreme modification.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you could avoid that route a bit with the bugs just by having.
I mean, honestly, it's a unique enough idea that like doing something ever so slightly similar to it wouldn't have a problem.
The interpretation I was seeing was more as the cybernetics being a way to further augment them for specialization rather than for perfection, but it would definitely be similar in aesthetic. Okay, let's add a little bit of metal to this little spigot. I love it. I love this bug. This is the coral. Your next 40k faction, the coral. Okay. I have another one. I was hoping that Tristan would be here for this one because I think he'd have cool inputs on it. He said in theory he should be showing up within 10 minutes or so. Have you heard from him? I'm not checking Signal.
No, I haven't heard from him either. Like,
okay.
Not in that regard. We could just wait. Like,
we could wait.
I could talk about another one myself, and then we'll wait for Tristan.
I think I'm just going to launch to it, and if he comes in, he'll figure it out. This is the one I am most proud of my ideas, and probably the one that would absolutely be the most controversial in the 40k community. I think so many people would hate this, and many people would love it. The Fleshcrons. So hear me out, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know the necrons.
I'm listening.
Mm-hmm. Part of the necrons' belief is that so the necrons being these ancient beings, their bodies were weak. They made a deal with star gods. They made living metal bodies for themselves. They transferred their consciousness. Sometimes it worked well. Sometimes it destroyed their mind. And now they're rising up to take over. Part of the beliefs they have is they're looking for a species that they can eventually take over, or an ability to create perfect bodies for themselves to transfer into. I had this thought of, what if some necrons, and they'd be hated by some, tolerated by others, hated by most, were having enough issues with their living metal breaking down over time, their re-uploading into bodies not functioning perfectly, What if they develop the ability not to complete biotransference? Because that's something they very specifically have not been able to figure out. Like, I don't want to change that much in the lore, but instead, breaking down their initial Necron body to the point that all it is a little like parasitic canoptic scarab that they are inside of, that they can take over Xenos bodies as like temporary ways to be living within flesh. And I think what's cool about this is it doesn't solve their problem at all, which is perfect for 40k. It just kind of would extend and change the problem to different ones. I also like it because I like the idea of an ally faction for Necrons to make their gameplay a bit more diverse, the way that Gene Stealers do for Tyranids. Now, I know you're going to have lore complaints. Let's start there, and I'll address them because I have thoughts for what I'm assuming you're going to have as a problem.
I mean, it does kind of remind me of Mind Shackle Scarabs.
Okay.
Which are a thing of just basically nanomachines that they use to puppet other bodies.
Yeah.
But you're saying this is more of a total transference, as in this is not a puppet they're controlling at a distance, but they're what they would consider to be their primary body?
Yeah, so they are breaking apart their primary body to the point where it is just their personality and them plugged into a canoptic scarab that they're using to control a body so that they can experience sensation of the flesh again. And so that they avoid the fact that their tech is breaking down for certain factions, for certain groups.
I just don't know if that would work in terms of actually giving them sensation.
I mean, here's what I was imagining. I think it would give them a level of sensation, but probably not enough in a way that would be dissatisfying. But it would almost be like a performative thing of how much they enjoy being alive again to all the other Necrons. I think they would have a culture of like showing off what Xenos you can get. And what I'm drawing here is I don't know if you know about them, but my idea was that at the maybe all of the what are they called? The Pharaons?
Oh yeah.
Either all of the Pharaons or just the most powerful Pharaon who leads this faction have sought out the most powerful beings. And I think a way that I want this to come up in the lore, or would want this to happen, is that the groups who become this are indebted to Trazyn because they've had to contact him to find out what Xeno species are worthwhile for taking over for their leadership caste.
Yeah, I think that's neat.
It makes sense, right? That Trazyn, this collector who goes around the galaxy stealing Xeno species for his museum, would probably be able to trade to sell them some stuff if they have something worthwhile, but also would be able to sell them information on what to hunt down. And I think probably just the leader of this faction is a Pharaon whose body is taken from one of the Crave.
Oh, okay. Huh.
So that's what I'm drawing here is the Crave Pharaon. So the Crave are incredibly stupidly powerful Xenos whose power have been compared in lore to the Primarchs, the children of the Emperor. They are wildly busted. They consume the life essence of entire worlds. They live for millennia, and very little has been done with them in the lore.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it is a galaxy full of alien horrors. It's just most of them have been at least culled.
Absolutely. Which is the same with it's the same situation as the Corral, where most of them have been culled. The Corral sounds like doing a lot better, but just a neat Xeno species that hasn't gotten a lot of limelight. And I think you couldn't turn something like the Crave into a faction, but to have a Crave's body being used by the most powerful Pharaon of the Fleshcrons, I think could be rad.
No, I could see it. I think it's kind of cool.
All right. I expected it to be harder to get you on my side for the Fleshcrons, to be honest.
Look, as a weird thing in lore, I have no problem with it. Like, as a faction, I don't know. I guess I think it takes away too much from the Necron's identity. Although, if it's purely performative as just this, they might even be seen in the same way that the not Flesh Tears, Blade ones are,
Yes.
where it's like,
Well,
oh
that's
yeah,
exactly
you're
what I was
covering
thinking.
yourself in meat, you weirdo.
But like I think to varying degrees, some of them it does satisfy their hunger, and it would be left ambiguous in the way a lot of 40k stuff is. Of is it psychosomatic? Is it just because they're actually eating that it satisfies their cravings to have sensation of the flesh? Are they getting something out of this? Are the other Necrons hating on them just because they've skipped ahead and cheated biotransference instead of delivering on the promise? Like, I think you could have a lot of ambiguity in it and disagreements about what exactly is happening, you know?
Yeah,
And also, the
I mean,
idea of the leader of it being in this godlike body, I think is very cool. Another thing I thought of that I liked about this, I liked the idea that there is kind of a struggle to fully control it because the original being's soul is inside and the Necrons still don't have souls.
you see, hmm, I'm trying to imagine a Necron, like at least from what we know of them in the lore, that would be okay with this. I think it would be kind of sort of the weird decadent nobles of their society who are doing this and are seen as just totally messed up in the head by everyone
Yeah,
else.
and that's
Because the
exactly
Necrons
what I was thinking of.
view pretty much all other life as just unbearably inferior.
Oh, that's exactly what I was thinking of that would make it interesting. So you'd have the Necrons who are doing this truly are desperate and convincing themselves that they're doing the right thing by like, no, 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 I have sensation of the flesh again. Don't worry, this is just a temporary body. You know, I'm gonna do the good one with you guys when that's an option. I just, just for now, I'm putting up with this inferior flesh that I own. And hey, while I'm waiting, I get to eat food, and you guys, you don't. But in actuality, it's this desperate bid to escape because the technology that's creating new bodies for them is breaking down. They aren't able to keep going, and they're maybe each time they transfer to a new body, it's working less and less well. So instead, they're keeping their consciousness stored on one entity and moving that body to body. But like, it is more than anything a play of desperation rather than actually the solution to biotransference.
Yeah, no. I can see that as long as it's again they, that I think does actually work well as them again almost as a weird cultural response
Mhm.
to just how dramatic biotransference was. Because the thing is, if I have to think of a single word to describe Necron culture, it is trauma.
Yeah, like they have experienced losing their free will, losing their souls, losing their bodies, losing their territory, losing control of the galaxy. Like the Necron have lost everything.
Twice.
Yes.
I mean, because it's not just that they lost their bodies, it's that the bodies that they were given at birth were so horrifically malfunctional. It's you wake up every single day patting yourself for cancers. You
Yeah.
wake up every single day wondering if this is going to be the day that your flesh finally betrays you and kills you, usually in an agonizing way. Starts to kill you, I should say.
Yeah. And that's why I think this is a fun idea because I think it plays into a lot of the themes of the Necron. If you do it in this way that it's not perfectly functional, that there's a lot of issues, that sometimes the original entity's impulses are too hard to control, that some Necrons don't have enough will left to actually be the one in charge, that like you don't actually know how much sensation they're feeling. Like it's more than in their metal body, but is it worth it? Are they actually feeling anything? Are they just saying they are? I think it has a lot of that potential to feel like yeah, trauma response in this attempt to get back what they've lost, and having the chief Baron be inside the body of a crave again, I think is just awesome.
It's a cool aesthetic.
Just this big ass demon monster wearing alien Egyptian clothing.
Yeah, no, I think it would help to make the Necrons feel more alien. Because that's something
Mhm.
that, okay, ever since they basically went back and did the big retcon for them that actually gave them personality and said, no, they're not all mindless, just a lot of them.
Yeah.
They're not enslaved to the Catan. They actually enslaved the Catan. They're playing Pokemon with them.
The Catan
Um,
enslaved them. They enslaved the Catan. It's fine. It's a mutual slavery.
um, ever since then, they've lost a lot of what made them feel alien.
Mhm.
Whereas I think this might actually help just in just pointing out just how different they are psychologically.
Yeah. And, like, I think the idea that I'd want to really make it feel like Necrons and not just like a Xeno soup, because I think also like most of the Xenos they take over shouldn't be the major players in the galaxy. Like I don't think you should. I think flavorfully, if you wanted to field guardsmen with this, I think that's fine. But I think just using some of the weirder stuff would be more fun for what you fill it out with. But it would just be this like mix of strange, bizarre aliens uh, dressed up in Necron garb with Necron weapons.
Hmm.
And I think they'd see the bodies as like an outfit. Like, look at this cool thing I found that I'm currently wearing. It's kind of out of season. I'm looking for something new, something fresh. Absolutely. Oh my god, I could absolutely see one of the weirder ones that maybe gets disregarded by other Pharaons, purchasing from Drukhari to find a new body.
Yeah, no, I could, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Everyone else is like dealing with the Eldar. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Well,
Like,
the
there's
Drukhari aren't the
implications. It's
worst,
happened in war.
and I
Yeah,
mean, who hasn't dealt with the Drukhari at some point? Like, what
yeah.
faction?
The Imperium's done it. Pow have probably done it.
They have. It
Sometimes,
didn't go well
sometimes you got to make a deal, and it will go badly because no one should trust the Drukhari.
with hinky space elf Satan.
So for aesthetic, like I said, the Xeno soup, bunch of weird aliens in cool alien Egyptian style clothing. A lot of the glowing green weapons still, but with all of these very diverse, strange Xenos. I think for gameplay, I would see them as similar to how you described the Corral, where like there's a lot of specialists based off of what Xenos they've taken over.
Hmm.
I think definitely like a middle faction, like not elite, not horde based.
All right, all right.
Like a decent amount of chaff, but some elite units based off of like some of the weirder Xenos and stuff. I was
And
also
also
thinking
just some of the more like grand technology of the Necrons.
exactly. So you have a lot of shooting power to rely on with that. And something else I was thinking of that I think would be kind of cool is some of them being forced to upload their consciousness into actual beasts. So you would have like beasts of war armored with weapons on them in place of vehicles. I think is that fully practical? No, but I think it would be needed to give them a really unique aesthetic. You know,
Yeah,
so
I
you'd
think that
have
would. I
like
think no. I think that would actually help a lot. Like again, help with the whole menagerie feel of it.
yeah, exactly. I want it to feel like Trazyn inspired because I think he's a lot of everyone's favorite Necron, being the weird Pokemon collector going around filling out his museum. Uh, So Trazyn's vibe of the menagerie is exactly what I'd want to get with the Fleshcrons.
I like that.
Which is that what they'd be called? Almost certainly not.
No,
Is
that is
that what
how
I
they
want?
might be nicknamed.
Yeah, I want that to be the fan nickname for them, is the Fleshcrons. But yeah, I see them having like these big beasts of war. A very mobile army, I think. Like high movement speed, decent shooting power. Again, pretty capable of playing for objectives. Much less longevity than Necrons, though,
Hmm. I
since
mean, yeah,
they don't have living flesh, so they don't
the
get to use
meat.
living flesh. And
I've
I think,
arrived, by the way.
oh, you've arrived. I'm talking
Hello.
about my favorite pitch. This is Tristan, everybody. Hi, Tristan.
Uh,
I'm talking about Fleshcrons.
yeah, I did pick up on a decent amount of it. I was like listening in as I was getting ready to sit down.
Hell yeah. Uh,
And one thing I was going to say that I think actually kind of is a fitting aesthetic that this could fill in a niche is kind of like body snatchers. Like the closest thing that the setting has to body snatchers is probably the the Tyranids with Gene Stealers, but I don't think that quite has the exact completely covers the whole like horror of body snatching and this discomfort of seeing something that looks like you but isn't you. And so I think that could.
Oh, now you're talking me back into wanting them to be able to field guardsmen.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to, but I think like being that body snatching vibe is something that's good. I think.
Yeah, I think it adds like an interesting, almost horror outlook to how they'd feel to look at. Like that, very clearly they have taken ownership of bodies that are not their own.
Yeah.
Genuinely, this is my fucking favorite idea of the ideas I came up with. I love it so much. I want the Fleshcrons. Games Workshop, listen to me. Listen to my pleas. Make the Fleshcrons real.
Yeah, and I think that like it still keeps with the aesthetic that I think pretty much every single faction has in 40k, which is there is an aspect of horror to it, and like even the Imperium of Man, like that means pretty easily to see the horror elements. But every single Xenos group also has their own either overt or like kind of covert horror aspects. I think this one has its own identity in that respect.
Absolutely, and that's definitely something that I think is really necessary when you're thinking of what could fit into 40k. Is like, what unique brand of horror is it? I think a lot of the struggle with when they introduce new factions is it often takes them a while to get to what's horrific about a new faction because they start with what's cool. Like if you look at original initial reaction to the Botan, that's not perspective at all. If you look at initial reaction to the Voton, if you look at initial reaction to the Tau, it just takes them a little bit to usually get to what about this faction is horrific, but it is necessary for a faction to feel 40k. Oh wow, sure. Man, that perspective was very holy shit. Okay. The throne was a late addition, so it was not well planned for.
These things happen. Actually, yeah, I wasn't actually really aware of the Crave until this stream of yours. Yeah,
I learned about them recently. They're very, very cool because it really feels like why they were built was just to have the most powerful Xenos, like on the individual level instead of at scale. And because people largely consider prime necrons to be the most powerful at scale, I think the idea of like a necron owning the body of a Crave is very inherently scary and would make this guy, whoever they'd make, because I don't think you'd use an existing character. I think it would have, because it needs to be a dynasty that was great in the days of the Necrons, but that since they've been falling apart faster than others since the biotransference, so they're not doing well. I think that's kind of what you'd need to make this work. So it would need to be someone we haven't heard of before. But I love the idea.
What other ideas have been pitched so far? I got some tuning in.
I talked about the Men of Iron. Oh my god, again. And Sean talked about the Quran. The Quran? No, not the Quran. The Corral. The gun people. The bug people. Not gun. Oh my god. Again, huh? The bug people. The Corral.
No, Braun, it's not a sexy dragon.
It's a bat person, I think. I think they're bat people, right?
Yeah, they're like bat demon monsters. They look like a very traditional demon, like not a 40k demon. Although they're drawn a few different ways. Some of them are more bat-like, some of them are more demon-like, but
yeah, I think the only thing I saw that is describing them was what's the term? Chiropteran?
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Which meaning like bat in shape at least.
Okay.
Bats. Which also I think because there's such a like sparse thing in the lore, there probably is a bit of divergence. Yeah, the Quran was pitched.
The Quran. Oh my god, the Quran was pitched. I'm not drawing a sexy dragon. I'm drawing a Crave, currently being possessed by a little bug on his back. This is not a sexy dragon. No sexy men being drawn today. Just a big alien monster being mind controlled by another alien monster who's less big.
I mean, well, okay. There might be a sexy man pitched later.
Oh, A sexy man might be pitched. Oh no, I've lied.
It depends on which of the two ideas I still have we end up talking about if we end up actually getting to any money. Because I know Tristan has a few that he wants to pitch that I want to hear as well.
We'll do one. We'll just go as we go. I have another thing booked in 50 minutes, but I want to go until then, see what we can do. Oh, that's the wrong color. I'm just going to color my boy quickly. So I've talked a bit about this. In lore, I see them being in a very interesting place where, like, I think inherently, because they've had to kind of break away from Necron culture, they would end up, and they need to, like, get flesh. I think they would interact with other Xenos more, and I think they would be an ally army for Necrons. You could run the units with each other and team up and have it make sense in lore, but they're not, like, strictly allied with Necrons. Like, they are seen kind of as traitors who've abandoned the right path of getting rid of biotransference. They're seen as, like, weak-willed and cowards for fleeing and finding the easy way out. So I think they'd be generally, like, pretty disliked overall by Necron kind.
Yeah, that would check out.
As much as they ally with them on occasion for tabletop purposes. But I could see them, like, in lore being seen as kind of like Gene Stealers becoming a faction where it doesn't change that much in the lore, where it's just like an expansion on the variety of this weird Xenos as far as the rest of the setting goes, where they'd be like, yeah, sometimes Necrons are piloting weird Xenos. Kill them the same as you do at before.
Doesn't matter what it looks like, still shoot it.
Could you think of any more interesting, because the one thing I really lacked here is how, other than the fact that they started by talking to Trazyn, Pip says Braun's got a point. Can we get a sexy man at this? I drew a sexy man last week. We can't always get a sexy man. Can you guys think of any more interesting ways that the lore would have repercussions from these guys outside of Necrons and Trazyn?
I guess the question is, with them interfacing like with more like normal organic things, I wonder if they would start to have more human-like, or at least like organic emotions, because currently they're a bit removed from that. So whether or not
I think
they
100% they would.
And then at that point, how do they interact with Tau? Like, would they actually start to get along a little bit?
Oh my god, I could absolutely see a weird fringe faction of Fleshcrons who are like, Tau got a point though. Why don't we fight for the greater good, guys? And then the rest of the Fleshcrons are like, what?
The weakness of the flesh opens you up to communist propaganda.
I think so.
I mean, potentially, yeah.
Outside of the Crave, what Xenos do you guys know that are powerful enough that, like, other Pharaons could choose to possess them to get some lords on the table?
Let me quickly look up one. John, I don't know if you can think of it. I mean, there's one.
Again, the big problem is I can never remember the names.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. It's a big setting.
Like, I like Rutgol, but I don't think that their bodies would be that interesting to them.
Fair enough. Yeah, the Crave is the only one that came to mind for me for, like, yeah, if a Pharaon was going to subject himself to a lesser entity, it would be the one who can mind control a planet and suck out their life force.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the factions I was going to bring up, their individuals are implied to be absurdly powerful.
Oh, so I guess we'll not answer now, but in the next segment where Sean talks, that one. You know what? I wasn't feeling this art until I added the little bit of glowies. I think this is rad now. Fucking love this guy. Way to go, bud. We brought it around.
See if I can find
Yum yum, that good soup, hearty planet soup. That's right. Drink up your planet soup so you can grow up big and strong.
I mean, the Tyranids drink planets just on the reg.
Yeah.
And that's why they're so strong.
Big and strong.
True. The one that I was thinking of is the Rutgol, which are from the Cronus Expanse, and they're very spooky.
Nice. What do they do?
They're kind of insectoid, psychic,
lizard.
Yeah, they're pretty strange. They're extremely powerful. They're horrific. Yeah, horrific 8-limbed alien monstrosities, twisted and warped. They seem to exist only for slaughter, descending on void ships and isolated colonies like a plague and disappearing once again into the cold depths of the void. They're pretty interesting because they favor a lot of cybernetic augmentation. So they're kind of they are simultaneously like kill, slaughter, maim, just running around destroying all that they can, but also they cybernetically augment themselves and also have, I think, a fair bit of psychic potential.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that would be the standard Pharaon for sure.
The Rakghoul who are psychers are pretty potent.
I think you'd make that the standard Pharaon and let the standard Pharaon be a psyker. And I think this would be a psyker too, because of the mind control power. I think you'd have a mind control power similar to Slanesh spells and the like. Wait, it's not Slanesh. I'm thinking of something else. But I think a mind control power from this guy as the Major Lord is something I'd like to see. Yeah, I didn't love this until I started the color and glow, and then this guy came out fucking dope. Fleshcrons is done.
Hell yeah.
All right, Tristan, I think we got time for one or two more, so let's hear from you, bud.
Yeah, mine's is kind of a simple one, but I think I'll kind of combine it into one idea because they're related. So it's the dual pitch of just increasing the Imperial soup in the tabletop. With the changing the lore and the more like there's been a bit more expansion onto Ogryn to look at like they've been talked about in more versatile ways. Like for example, in recent books, there's been a female psyker Ogryn.
Okay.
And I think that the expansion of Ogryn into being more diverse, especially with there's so many, there is like said to be a number of Ogryn worlds, so potentially there could be its own faction with a lot more diverse units, kind of pulling on fantasy, looking at a lot of the interesting diversity in fantasy with the ogres.
Ogryn man-eaters?
Yeah, like basically they just started like pulling on man-eaters, pulling on potentially like some fire shenanigans, like fire worship in some sort, because they're really tough.
I could see fire-based psychers for sure.
Yeah. I also just really like the fire-based wizards from fantasy as well. I think I really like their vaguely like Polynesian aesthetic. I think it's really cool. The other idea, which is kind of the dual part of increasing the soup, is just the Administratum as its own faction.
We got to focus on one for now. I think Ogryn.
All right. Yeah.
Big boy.
There really isn't too many.
When I started drawing Ogryn is why.
There really isn't too many Ogryn who are like really, really big figures. They're usually like sidekicks or secondary characters to human main characters. But I think that there could be some pretty interesting ones that maybe are either born smarter or have the bonehead augmentation to make them smarter.
Oh yeah.
And then they could be running their own fleets and things. I think that's the idea of Ogryn potentially with the supporting of ratlings.
That's great. What do ratlings look like again? I'm including that in this picture for sure.
They look like halflings.
Okay.
Yeah, they're fantasy. They're 40k halflings. I almost said fantasy halflings.
Yeah, they usually have very hairy feet. They have like lots of beards and stuff. They look like tiny men.
Okay.
Tiny men.
Hear me out. Mostly because I can't see the Ogryns making a interstellar ship functional on their own. But I could see them as essentially fulfilling similar roles as almost a warrior group for a large group of essentially serfs. Some kind of like how some Space Marine chapters are, where they are way more into the whole like dominating their physically inferior servants. So they could almost.
Actually, finish before I. Yeah.
No, that was basically it.
So to counterpoint, I feel like when you're doing Imperial soup factions, you don't need them to be fully self-sufficient. Like Titans rely a lot on support from Mechanicus to get where they're going. I feel like in an Imperial faction, because you're just adding to that mixture, you can absolutely go for something that's not entirely self-sufficient, you know?
Yeah. I think there's also it could be a little bit different where it is a bit more self-sufficient compared to other groups because they're so culturally and physically different. But it still is like obviously a bit reliant because it needs to interact with, getting ammo and all those things and getting weapons. So in that way, it does. But I would like to see them be brought into a more important role where they actually do have their own commanders and things. I think that'd be really cool.
I think it'd be really cool. And because of the bonehead modification to make them smarter, or I could even just see like a strain of unusually intelligent Ogryn that exists sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm drawing a little rattling backpack for this Ogryn here.
A classic, really, a true classic.
Got big stompers on. Juicy stompers.
Oh no. Yeah, and so like the inclusion of just like female Ogryn, because it's always been a mystery as to like whether or not they exist.
Oh yeah, this is a female Ogryn, by the way. Female Ogryn with her male rattling backpack, as it should be.
Fantastic.
The ideal relationship.
And it could be in recent lore that the popping up of that like Psyker Ogryn maybe because of the Psychic Awakening, or it could just be that they have had Psykers that's just less common. Like it's kind of a question as to why this one has finally popped up and there hasn't really been examples of it prior.
There are ways of artificially making Psychic Ogryn.
So there
this one's fun, I think.
So it wouldn't need nearly as much of a dramatic like difference from or unique visual identity as a lot of factions because it's part of Imperial Soup. But what do you see as like the visual? What's the style here that lets us know about the Ogryn? What tells us? What tells us looking at them that this is the Ogryn?
I think it's like stylized. Well, like, looking at the distinct physiology that they have because they're abhumans, but also I think that there's a lot of interesting cultural aspects and linguistic aspects that they'd have in that are different from like the standard. So I know that like they're very protective usually of their squads, like specifically human squads, because they all often call them little ones or little ones.
Oh, they remind them of children.
Yeah, they get really protective, and they're like, I'm the big guy, and I protect the little one.
Oh man, how are ogres the best part of every 40k setting? Like, just always the best.
I mean, Warhammer does such a good job of Ogryn, and they're so endearing. Usually, I mean, at least they have the capacity to be so. Not always that way, but.
So is it just the size? Are we feeling like cruder equipment, or is there specific like shape and aesthetic, like how the guardsmen look very regular military, the Astartes look like weird and blocky, the Custodes look overly gilded?
I'd say that pretty central. Weapon, right? Sorry, my apologies.
Pitch.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my pitch in terms of keeping their aesthetic unique is everything should look like it's designed to be swung at an enemy. Like any piece of equipment should be realistically usable as a melee weapon. Because the problem with the Ogryn, well, our problem, quote unquote, is that usually in the middle of combat, they'll forget what they're holding and just swing whatever.
So adding a weapon on everything is great. I love that. Okay, Tristan, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say probably the more unusual or unorthodox it feels like, keeping with the themes in 40k of like all these weapons, all these vehicles don't like, there's that argument that it's probably like originally farming equipment or like for construction, all like similarly, this kind of takes it to a next step of you see a cannon and it's like, that wasn't meant to be held by a person, but he's holding it. Kind of like the fantasy lead belchers and stuff where they just are holding a cannon and it's just they fire it.
Absolutely my inspiration for this pick, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a way, they can be used as discount Space Marines. Like, they're stupidly tough. They're good, like no matter what, they're always going to be good in melee. And they can use heavy weapons on the march, kind of like Devastator squads of Space Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think there'd be a big trend of pretty much every single one of them having big things, big weapons. There also could be something interesting in taking inspiration from Darktide. There could be using like gigantic riot shields and things like that, or just a big hunk of metal.
The breacher shields with like Ogryn. What's it called? Bull squads? Bullgryns. That of course it's Bullgryns.
Yeah,
Bullgryns are like huge riot shield. Very good at breaching. Very dangerous.
And I think you could also go ahead.
No, you go.
Just one thing, I think you could probably have some funny diversity in like. I just thought of a goofy idea of one planet that potentially took on like some old martial traditions of no, we're Spartans. Shield wall.
Oh, I love it. They're so endearing.
They do the shield wall. And they do
Oh,
their
I
best.
love that. Yes, Ogryn shield wall. Yes.
They just have big fence posts as spears.
Ogryn with fence post, spear, and shield wall. I love it. It's amazing.
And they just occasionally throw out the odd word of poorly pronounced Greek.
Yeah. And they take on the names. The butchered names. Sparker. Sparker.
We're Sporkins.
Yeah.
Oh man, I would also love the disparity where the boneheads, as like the smart ones, the people who with their human intelligence are capable of like making plans and stuff, still having like Ogryn heart where they like don't judge the dumber Ogryns and are just like, no, these are still my friends and family. I love them.
Yeah.
I mean, the boneheads usually do have a really good relationship with their fellows because they're smart enough to understand that they're dumb, if that makes sense, that like their fellows are dumb. That they're not... Because the thing is, one problem that Ogryn have is that they don't really have a complex understanding of other people because they're genuinely too stupid to.
Wholesome boys.
And so, yeah.
Doing their best.
They really are.
Red Headband's too catachan for this.
I guess one other thing I could see adding to them is going a weirdly religious angle with it. Like almost...
What kind of religion?
Well, the thing is, they are deeply imperial cult. Like, because it's very easy to convince them. It's the whole, like, blessed is the mind too small for doubt. And you could take that in a weird direction by giving them essentially religious officers, or maybe more... I don't know, more like religious leaders in a very, we know he's speaking to the emperor because he crumps the hardest kind of thing. Almost orky. Yeah.
Most orky. Orky worship. Oh, man. How do you see them playing on tabletop? And I imagine the answer is going to be a lot like Ogres in Fantasy.
Yeah, I think it really would be... Things are on average fairly expensive and a little bit similar to like Space Marines, but I think it would just be a bit more unorthodox. There'd be potentially, they probably wouldn't have much armor on average, but they would probably have a focus on bigger weapons and bigger hits. Probably they would struggle against massed armies would be their big thing, I think, but they would do well against few entity armies.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, the other way I could sort of see it is if they're wearing like their sort of heavy armor, it might be that they're really hard to kill without almost anti-tank weapons.
Oh my god, yeah, instead of tank vehicles, you just have an Ogryn and so much fucking armor that they're hard to get off the board.
Because like even base Ogryns, I think have multiple wounds. I think they have like relatively high armor. Like they are hard to put down, obviously. So having that as your sort of baseline might make it so small arms fire is just actually not that effective against you. Yeah, like...
Yeah, currently on the tabletop, I just looked at them. They have actually quite a lot of wounds at 3 wounds, but their save is quite low at that 5+.
It's a Terminator!
Oh.
Yeah. But they have very high strength and toughness at 6 and 5, respectively.
That makes sense. I would also say that there isn't really a charge-based army. Like, there's grindy melee armies, but the only charge-based army is Khorne.
Probably, yeah.
Like, Khornate armies.
I mean, orcs can re-roll charge. They have a few advantages on charge. I'd say they're close.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
We're also good at getting out of vehicles and charging, I think, in 9th, but I could be misremembering.
But yeah, just a... sorry. I was going to say that, because obviously orcs are pretty heavy on, like, powerful on the charge, but they're also a horde army, not an elite army, whereas the world leaders are really, and somewhat Demons of Khorne, are the sort of elite charge army, where you have 18 models charge their 100 and win. Or die before they even get into melee.
Oh man, I do love that. Like, they just charge. Like that's what the Ogryn army offers is you charge, and if you manage to kill enough units on the charge, you're probably gonna win the game. And if you don't, shame.
Kind of how the the ogres played in fantasy. They were a sledgehammer army. You would swing once, and you either won or you lost. That was it. Like once you set up the charge and initiated it, that was kind of it.
So you'd kind of have these heavier weapons, I guess, being more for softening people up for the oncoming charge.
Yeah. How well you think they could fire on the move? Well, I mean, they'd probably have orc levels of inaccuracy, but
yeah,
but
I mean,
again,
even
yeah,
the Ripper gun is considered an assault weapon, so it's meant to be fired on the run.
yeah, but like
Nice.
they're more heavy support models. That's kind of the question.
Baby Bjorn
Yeah.
for the Ratling.
Yeah, I think they'd have some fun snipers with ratlings as well, because they do have a good dynamic in lore, which I think it can kind of mirror fantasy with ogres and their snotlings, which is always fun. Actually, I'm looking at them now. They actually even currently have some stratagems, like specifically for ogres, which is like Thunderous Charge, which makes them really good on charging, and then Shield of Flesh, which helps them block shots for allies. So that's already good. Like, and we just expanded on that. I think that it could be a really fun faction of its own.
Absolutely. I like this idea a lot. How do you I get they're already there, so it's not too much, but how do you see them being more significant and having their own squads affecting lore?
I think that it potentially could come from the Great Rift, and so now that they end up having just more autonomy because they just get less messages, but they still want to do things, so they end up start organizing a bit more. Maybe certain a variety of boneheads get together and organize a coherent group that starts just fixing problems in Ogryn ways,
like in Imperium Nihilus.
In Nihilus, yeah.
Yeah, they could be, because I think, okay, what I want them to do with Imperium Nihilus, but who the hell knows, is that they go in a direction of there are more, the Imperium is still there, but it's more of a weak confederation than an actual, anything resembling even a bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
Where you essentially have
so much harder now.
Yeah, all these different groups that sort of stumble around in an uncoordinated way, and if they're both waving an Aquila, they probably won't fire on each other immediately.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, yeah, they probably start organizing and start potentially conquering more worlds, and maybe colonizing more worlds, retaking it from things that are lost, and they're just like, we like it here, we're gonna stay.
This is part of the pyramid now.
For the Emperor. I think.
For the Emperor, he's biggest.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think they can go around, and then that cultural divergence of them spreading could be interesting, and you'd start having not quite exact mirror of Imperial Guard regiment diversity, but in a similar sense, this weird variety of the Spartan idea that we had. Potentially a small group that are the psychic group. I hesitate to say a planet that maybe would have a higher proportion of it, but maybe that would be where they would.
I mean, if it's close enough to the Great Rift.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think there could be some interesting things. I also think that a very funny thing that would be good in the setting is all-female Ogryn group, which just runs around and are Amazonians.
Nice.
Yeah, no, that's fun.
Yeah, just there's a lot of fun aesthetics that you could get into. There would be some aesthetic overlap with the Guard, but I think you really have to just lean into how wholesome, goofy, and sometimes absurd the Ogryn are.
Yeah, much like the orcs, they are one of the sillier parts of Warhammer lore, because they often don't quite understand cultural stuff well enough, and because of that, end up poking fun at how silly 40k is based off of their interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Just having someone not quite get all of this stuff definitely does a lot to make it just feel as silly as it actually can be at times.
Yeah.
I like this pink.
Yeah, and the one Psyker that Ogryn Psyker that's really cited in lore is it's quite recent. I think it was in M42, so it's post Great Rift. Yeah. and she was able to actually like move a downed bomber, like a bombing plane, to like shield her commissar from I think fire and things. Mortar
Pretty
fire.
impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
So she's by no means a weak psyker, even though like the Imperial cult does state that like, nah, Ogryn, too dumb. And she's just
too
like,
dumb, can't psychic.
And she just does it.
Look,
Yeah, then
she does it
pulled into
anyways.
their-
She's that cool.
Exactly.
Built
She got
literally
pulled-
different.
You're right. Pulled into the Inquisition because of it.
Okay. In terms of how this faction could sort of actually get its feet under it, so there's weird rules in terms of the Imperium with commissars being able to essentially deputize, and also with them being able to essentially take command of entire regiments or even larger. Like there are Lord General commissars in effect.
Mm-hmm.
How would you think about that as like a sort of a starting off point where there is a commissar who with his dying moment hands off his hat and his authority to an Ogryn who is like his most loyal bodyguard and was surprisingly intelligent because he doesn't trust anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's sort of becoming a rallying point.
Yeah, I think that's a very fun start to it, and it has big like man-eater vibes to it as well. It's like now I'm the commissar.
I'm the commissar, and you follow my orders now.
It's like the other idea I had is just a little too silly. It's just making it so that way an Inquisitor does that. So you have an Ogryn with an Inquisitorial rosette.
Oh no, I could genuinely see it though for either a bonehead or just an unusually intelligent Ogryn.
Yeah, especially for a psychic one.
Yeah, in a situation of emergency where loyalty is the most important thing, I could see an Inquisitor saying, "No, I need loyalty now more than ever, and there's no one more loyal than an Ogryn."
No, he's got a point.
Whether or not that Inquisitor will last, that's unlikely. But in Nihilus, who knows?
But they
Imperium
did it
Nihilus.
anyways.
They did it anyways. Sean and I talk about Imperium Nihilus from time to time, and we really are looking forward to the interesting stories. Imperium Nihilus is the other, so there's Imperium Sanctus and Nihilus. The Great Rift is the big chaos warp storm that is cut the galaxy in half.
Right, where they copied Shadow and Bone.
Exactly. So Imperium Sanctus is the one where that's the side that has the like Earth, Terra, it has Gilliman, and it's kind of like where he's consolidating power and things are getting more centralized, thus being able to be more competent and act upon things. Imperium Nihilus, on the other hand, is the other side where they do not see the light of Terra in the warp, and
bad.
And so it's really bad, yeah, because it's completely blocked off by warp storms, which have a tendency to block off the Astronomicon, the way that people navigate in the warp. And so this other side is struggling to actually move and act on things, and also it's really hard to get information back and forth between Terra, and so it's kind of a lawless area. Largely, there is the de facto leader is, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. It's Dante, right? The Jenny boy. He's gone. I think it's Dante who is the chapter master for the Blood Angels.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, Gilliman basically deputized him as like, you're gonna figure it out. You're also now a Primaris Marine. And he went through the process of becoming a Primaris Marine. But yeah, so it's like the Wild West over there, because there's a lot less information moving around. People can't really navigate in the warp that well, so they have to use short jumps more than long jumps. And there's a lot more chaos on that side. Like there's just things are kind of going downhill on that side, and then on the Gilliman side, everything's getting much better, in quotes. So it's this interesting thing in lore, in my opinion, where I think that the Imperium was this prior to the Great Rift was this steadily rolling downhill at a very, very slow pace, decay. Then the big change in lore, and Gilliman's back, and it's okay, now things are getting better. Oh wait, but also everything on the other side is getting much, much worse. So it still kind of evens out. But back to our conversation. So what's interesting about Nihilus is that because it's so much more lawless, and there's the iron hand of the Imperium is so much weaker, you can have a lot of divergent factions in the Imperium.
Nice.
So I think that Ogryn starting to like pick up their power and like doing more things. They're like, well, we're not getting orders nearly as much, and there's whole Ogryn worlds, where it's just that's where the Ogryn are. And,
yeah, I think one charismatic Ogryn, either like given title of commissar, given a rosette, something like a weirdly intelligent Ogryn given a level of power is all that would be needed for this to happen as like a full ass faction, and I think it'd be awesome. I mean, the biggest downside for gameplay would be, in theory, they're just on one side of the Great Rift and a post Great Rift faction, so it's a little bit hard to come up with lore reasons for them to fight your friends or whatever. But that's all over 40k. Like, there's tons of factions where it's hard to figure out why are we actually playing the game. How do we make the story and the mechanic line up at all?
Yeah.
Like, that's not an uncommon thing. I think I'm just going to add some red backlighting to get more of the implied redness of the zone in. And then a little brighter. And then I'm going to call it for this one, and we're going to be on to the last one. Before then, I want to say I love the idea of Ogryn armies so much. I think it's a great way of expanding Imperial Soup in a really fun way and giving more options and play styles. And I think it is a play style that, Sean's right, is kind of underserved in 40k, where the closest thing is Children of the Emperor. Okay, I wanted to go for like kind of a revolution poster, like revolutionary propaganda look for it.
Yeah, I can see it. It has that vibe.
Yeah, it's a little rougher than I wanted, but hey, you know what? They can't all be the Fleshcrons.
I'm glad they're not all Fleshcrons. They scare me.
I don't know why, but it reminds me of Hellboy comic cover art. I get Pip. I can see that. Let's go back and take a look. I can see that a bit. It's definitely rougher, but they give themselves a lot more time, so that makes sense. But I can see Hellboy comic vibes to that.
No, I see it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We have time for one more. Do we want to give Tristan 2, or do we want to hear Sean's... is he your third? Second one. Only second one. I think we want to hear Sean's second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I just got to check something real quick.
Half of the stage, Shawnee boy.
Oh, sorry. Wait.
You're
so
the
we're
sage.
going with mine then?
Mm-hmm.
You're going with
Oh,
yours.
shoot. Well, then the problem is I have 3... Okay, no, actually, I'm going to eliminate one because I think Blondie wants to talk about that at some point, so...
Okay.
And it kind of is similar to his idea. So another Xeno Soup or a non-Imperial human faction?
Oh, boy. Xeno Soup is... I feel like there's a reason we all kind of lean that way, because something really interesting about the Tau was that they were able to bring old, left-behind Xenos into the forefront, and I think 40k could use more of that. We've already done one of those, and we've already done one Imperium.
I'm sending you some reference art for what I'm going to talk about.
I'm going to do the Weirder Xenos first, I think.
Oh, we're doing Weirder Xenos then? Okay. So,
because I think we're just going to talk about Arbites otherwise, and they just got added to Kill Team.
Sorry, I wasn't going to talk about Arbites. I was going to talk about the Sever and Dominate.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, no, Xenos it is. Still Xenos.
Okay.
I'm going to stick to my word.
So, I want to talk about the Uvath because I think they're one of the most interesting bits of the lore.
How do you spell that, my man? Let's get some reference.
YU apostrophe VATH, and the problem is there's no actual examples of them in terms of pictures, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, so it's a little bit hard.
What? Ooh, that's a weird looking thing. Okay, wow, Sean, what am I looking at, my man?
I don't know what you're looking at.
I searched Uvath. I think I got a direction for this one. I think I got a direction. All right, hit me up. What's going on?
Okay, so the Uvath are one of the most psychically, technologically advanced species out there.
Okay.
They probably gave the Eldar Empire a run for its money in that regard.
All right, then.
They were also some of the most horrific slavers to have ever existed in the in the 40k galaxy, which is saying something.
It's saying something because the Drukhari do exist.
Yeah, and I think that they are, in a lot of ways, worse. But
I really want to let you continue with that, but to give context to the audience, the Drukhari torture people for soul sustenance. They must cause unique suffering and harm to live. And my man Sean over here is telling me that the Yuvath are worse. This
Saying
is
the
it's
Yuvath,
so bad.
in terms of their capacity to destroy what you are for their own benefit, are genuinely worse than the Drukhari.
Oh my god, okay,
Because
well, go on.
the Drukhari, I mean, they're still limited to mostly just messing with your mind and body.
Mhm.
The Yuvath are soul slavers. They are the sort of absurdly arrogant, possibly absurdly ancient race, depending, and they are an extreme slave society, where every individual Yuvath as a person, like a member of their founding race, might have hundreds of thousands to billions of slaves that are just under their direct either control or thraldom. They have ships that would just fly through, still, some of them autonomously, fly around, enslaving entire planets almost just by accident. Their visage was considered so horrific and so soul-rending that simply looking on a Yuvath was enough to, well, basically drive most people utterly insane, or, suddenly find their allegiances shifting, or simply dying.
So this is the Lovecraft faction.
Yes, and that's actually kind of why, that's one of the reasons why I like them, is because they really could be this truly alien horror, kind of a mixture between, there's truly alien like the Tyranids, because again, I think the Tyranids are one of the few truly alien races in the setting that are actually like a major faction. Like there's a few minor Xenos, but
Orcs are both yes and no on it.
Yeah, orcs are just British people when their football team loses.
Oh no! Continue.
Sorry. Like, to a large extent, the Xenos races are humans with extreme cultures and ideologies by human standards.
Mhm.
Whereas I think the Yuvath, because of their connection to the warp, because of their obsession with slavery, because the actual species might only number in the thousands. They would be this. That's what orcs are. Sorry, I just read in the chat. They might be this sort of almost cartoonishly evil interpretation of old style nobles. They could also, in a way, be like how a lot of settings portray vampires. Where
we
you
can
have
finally have a 40k equivalent to the vampire counts.
Honestly, yeah, that's kind of where I was going with this. And in terms of their armies, I think having a single Yuvath leading vast numbers of either constructs, and the constructs would look like, in my opinion at least, a cross between the sort of demon engines of Chaos factions and the Wraithbone constructs of the Eldari.
Okay. I'm going to draw a guy they've taken over, but it's too late now, but I wish I'd heard that earlier, because that's rad.
Yeah, sorry, I probably
upset.
should have sent you...
No worries.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to go in no ref. I like
fair enough,
moving on the fly. I really, genuinely love... I love changing plans. Let's do it. I only got 10 minutes. Doesn't matter.
All right, I believe in you. Okay, so, the Whisper ships... okay, so their primary battleship, because most of their fleets were made up of the ships of the species that they've enslaved. But their sort of primary proper warships is just a hole in material reality used to create telekinetic strands that pull together an actual vague ship form. Often made up of various sort of crystals and other sort of, esoteric bullcrap.
That's very cool.
But their primary power source as a society is the warp. They actually are capable of just treating chaos like it's their slave.
Like they enslave the... Oh my god, these guys have hell-powered ships.
Yep, and they have their sort of one of their primary forms of computing is you take some demons and you slap it into a conventional computer.
Don't do that. Don't have that happening.
They bully demons.
Oh
or
my
at least
god.
Warp things. It's kind of the same way. Sorry.
I couldn't have imagined that I'd agree with you about them sounding worse than Drukhari, but do go on. I am unpleasantly surprised.
They're kind of like how the Eldar back in the grand old days could create sort of minor gods to do their bidding, or warp constructs, thought constructs. It's a little bit like that, but way more fucked up. Oh, sorry. Am I allowed to cuss? I've been trying not to.
I've cursed a lot.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
See, this is exactly why I wanted to do this episode. Dali Appenzauer is I considering yourself a lore aficionado. 40k has so many edge case weird stories that are so cool, and I really wanted to just go into them in a fun conversation. Do go on, Sean.
Right. I actually, because I was looking for something specifically, and I found it on the wiki.
Nice.
The Uvath Bone Warden. They are a dark energy warp construct that possesses dead matter around them, often corpses, because I guess they find it funny. And these corpses are held together by sort of ribbons of crackling black telekinetic energy, and they can then use that as a body.
Oh, that's rad. Okay, so we're going to be changing some stuff up here. Changing so much. We got 8 minutes. Let's do it. We got this.
Yeah, and again, it's the fact that they could just enslave or drive mad entire planets with one of their ships just passing by.
Oh my god.
And the fact that they became the primary target of one of the largest Imperial crusades to date, the Angevin Crusade. And it took the intervention of a straight up, well, okay, he wasn't a saint yet, but he definitely had some boostos from the Emperor, Saint Drusus.
Okay.
Saint Drusus was the one who led the crusade in its sort of final conflicts against the Uvath. So it took somebody who was at least guided by the Emperor, leading one of the largest Imperial crusades ever, to destroy what might have been one of their small outposts, depending on how you see it. Because they might be extragalactic, they might be have just been there. Also, we talked about the Rat Ghoul, and the Rat Ghoul are strongly implied to have once been their servants, or potentially be a new scouting force for them. Because the Rat Ghoul techno shamans really like Uvath tech.
Oh my god, that's so cool. These are terrifying.
Yeah.
Like true eldritch nightmare monsters for the lore. Like, we don't need to think that much about how if this became a major faction, how much it would impact stuff, because it would impact stuff as, holy fuck, the new big bad is here.
Yeah, and so I think that they could be this sort of, again, because I think they could totally be a soup faction, because they can just pull any sort of minor Xenos. It's like, oh yeah, this is a Uvath slave now. Imperial Guard could be Uvath slaves. Again, they have no problem bending entire planets to their will, using warp shenanigans.
What I find so interesting about that as an option is that, like, I feel like if you're playing them, like, what comes to mind for gameplay already is that they would have, you don't really, if what you feel isn't as important, because they would have a psychic phase as significant as a Tau shooting phase.
Totally. I mean, and also, I think they could be similar to the vampire counts in terms of, if you lose your leader, it's not just bad, it's damn near the end of the game for you.
Like, this would be an army that, like the vampire counts in Warhammer Fantasy, because everything is held together by the psychic will of these lords, everything falls apart. Like, it's all done. Okay, so 6 minutes. I got to speed up even more. Let's go fast.
And so that is something that I think would make them a very interesting faction. Yeah, and again, constructs, I like the aesthetic of Wraithbone, but also more messed up and looking more chaosy. I'm probably repeating myself a bit. Right, the one thing I did want to talk about was just the fact that, again, they managed to actually use warp power on a day-to-day basis in their society without it seemingly corrupting them and bending them to the will of the Chaos Gods.
I mean, they're too evil on their own. They are chaos. They don't need help being more chaotic.
They're not chaotic. They're tyrants.
I know, but it's like there's something else worse almost. God, yes.
They would be such a evil, tyrannical force that the raw anarchic power of chaos suddenly starts bending to their will, not the other way around. And that is what I think would make them really interesting.
Absolutely. Holy shit. I'm glad we saved this one for last. This is rad as hell.
Unfortunately, again, there's not that much about them, so I'm kind of...
Yeah, that's just more room for us to make stuff up, lads.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that they're an interesting faction as well, because I think that Chaos doesn't really have quite like a. If you think about things in like predator and prey kind of situation, they distinctly they are almost always predators. Very few things truly prey upon them. And so Evath can kind of fit that a little bit. It's like something that genuinely scares Chaos.
Yes, as simple as this is, I'm actually loving how this art's coming out. I'm glad I changed away from just a dude. It was the right call. Delete your art. That's a lesson.
I guess the one thing I almost want to compare them to is Chaos Dwarves, funny enough, from Fantasy.
Huh.
Where Chaos Dwarves will enslave demons. They are one of the few factions that can actually get away with properly subjugating demons. And because of their innate, I guess, resistance to chaos, or just their unique relationship with it.
Oh, wow. So gameplay-wise, like I said, I see them as having the most powerful psychic phase in the game.
Oh, definitely.
Visually, I'm imagining a lot of the unique Xenos they're going to bring back. They would bring back for the soup of this would be like very spooky looking. They'd all be like mindless zombies in posture.
I think their base troop choice would be various types of Rakghoul.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Absolutely. And then the lords would just be like, if you don't, you need to kill it. Like it's every game is assassination. If you don't kill the lord, you are doomed. I could see if you're willing to break tabletop rules, I could also see fun like for fun armies where you're like, my lord is this lord from a different faction who got possessed. One of them is living inside of him. Yeah, this is such a weirdly simple bit of artwork that I put together, but I love how this came together. I love this concept. Holy shit, this is awesome. Any last words you want to put in? We got 3 minutes left.
I just want to very quickly, because I found this on the wiki, so take it with a grain of salt, because like I haven't read the original source for this. But the resonance, Uvath machinery that uses really powerful warp sorcery. It's used to create hell worlds, swirling centers of warp tides, where they can essentially increase production by bending reality. Sustained by foundation tunnels of human sacrifice and machine-enhanced psycho agony.
It's not that much worse than a Psi Titan.
Fair enough.
Definitely the good guys, though. You hear that? You're like, good guys.
Oh, right, and this thing was still functional on a hive world. That's what happened. Okay, wow. And it caused people to hallucinate or construct false memories to explain you doing things that are utterly against your own will. So it doesn't just enslave you, it makes you rationalize your own slavery.
Oh my god, that's even more fucked up. I love it. Wow. As I finish up here, thank you guys both. Thank you, audience, for chiming in, for watching. I've had an absolute blast with this. What do you guys want to say goodbye?
I like how expansive the 40k universe is, and I actually think that the return of the Votan is a good sign for the franchise in general, because it shows that Games Workshop is willing to pull on old lore and do stuff that the community has kind of been calling on, and it's a really unique in a really unique way that is kind of revitalized a lot of the lore and the kind of the setting in general. So I'm looking forward to see what they do in the future.
Yeah,
honestly, I'd say the same thing about the Ynnari, because the Ynnari were something that were talked about, or like the Yniad, the god of the dead, was something that was talked about so long ago, like ages ago.
And genuinely, because of this, like that means all the things we've talked about have a chance of happening because they are pulling on these seeds they've planted, and that's amazing to see.
Yeah, and just again, it actually made the Eldar have a path forward and gave them a lot of energy that they just were losing, because I mean they are a waning faction, but now they're a desperate fighting back waning faction, not just one that seems to be, ooh, we can see the future and we know it's all hopeless, so we're just gonna whine about it and then sometimes blow up an imperial world for no frickin' reason.
As we close out, I'm gonna acknowledge Daily Atenzar, so hard to pronounce, in chat again. I'm Lord Motley from I Met on Discord. I love this. Hope you guys stay tuned for my segment. Oh yeah, that's our next guest. Duh, I got names mixed up. It'd be great to hear parts of 40k universe I've never gotten to explore. I'm gonna be talking to the Appenzar about their upcoming novel, which I'm very excited about. Thank you guys so much for being on. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm just gonna do a quick flip through of all of the lovely art we've had today. God, this is my favorite though. That one's pretty good too. It's robots. This is a super fun time. I hope everybody watching enjoyed it. I really like doing these super fast drawings, even if they didn't turn out really well, because it was a good challenge. And thanks again for you guys coming on.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to hop into the interview chat. I'm going to get to talking about that. And everybody, have a good one if you're watching this video.
So long.
So long.
Harlequin.
Except the Harlequins. Look, the Harlequins don't need to make sense. They're space clowns. They're clown
goblins. Clown elf goblins.